Hi everyone, welcome back. This is such a fun video because we have started traveling again, and while we were on our last trip, I received all these messages from moms asking for updated travel tips, asking what it's like to travel now with 2 kids and everything, so I'm gonna share all of that. Really quickly, fun story, I guess fun, but more like sad story. In February of last year, like right before all the pandemic stuff happened, we just got super lucky and decided to go on a last minute trip to Mexico. And we took Isla, she was like 3 months old. We got her like a passport, did all of that stuff. And I had just finished editing a video. We shot this video, edited it with all of my travel tips with like 2 babies now and stuff. And then we didn't post the video because we all know what then happened. We just scrapped the video. So this feels like almost like a redo of that video, except now I have a toddler. Isla is almost 2 years old and Nikosh is actually 4 years old now. So it was a completely different experience from that. So I'm gonna share all of it. But first I just want to talk about the trip a little bit because it really was so nice to go and take a real vacation. For this trip, we decided to go to Cabo, to Mexico for a little vacation. We were celebrating a few things actually. One, we were celebrating the fact that we could travel, which was just a celebration in itself because it feels so nice to have everything start to open up a little bit here in Los Angeles. I know in some places it's not the same, but in LA, in Mexico, there's a lot more that you can do now. So it's been really, I think we feel really grateful for this. So that in itself was a celebration. The actual travel and everything was pretty straightforward. We had a few meltdowns with Isla, but for the most part, it was pretty easy. We expected her to sleep on the plane because we planned all the flights around her nap time, and that's what worked for Nikosh. Didn't work with Isla at all, but that's okay. I still have some tips around that. But also we were celebrating a few other things. So we were celebrating our 10-year anniversary. Arun and I have been married for 10 years. It kind of feels crazy to say that I've been married to somebody for 10 years and obviously like have been with someone for even longer than 10 years. So it's kind of wild to think that. So we went to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. Arun's parents actually celebrated their 50-year anniversary. So they came on this trip with us. Their anniversary is actually the day before ours. So they came with us partially to help us with the babies, but also partially to celebrate. So those were like all the things that we were celebrating. It felt like a really big, important trip. We ponied up for a really nice resort. Maybe a little overpriced in my opinion, but I'm not gonna harp on that. I am going to focus on the positives and be grateful that we could actually afford it too, because that's definitely something that I truly was really grateful for. We went to a resort called the one and only Palmilla, and it is not an all-inclusive resort, which I actually think is a great idea when you have kids, but it's a great resort because it has all of these different activities built in. We didn't leave the resort once. We stayed at the resort. We knew we were gonna spend all of our time there like that, so we really ponied up for our room too. We got this really large room. I mean, like it could be somebody's apartment, you know, like it's definitely like a starter apartment home kind of thing. You know, it had like a living room, it had 2 bathrooms, it had, you know, like its own bedroom. And the best part about it really was the patio situation. It had this really large patio. We could eat breakfast out there and dinner or lunch, whatever we wanted to eat. There was, you know, a little dining table outside. There were lots of seating areas outside, and there was a plunge pool. So we sort of chose this room because of all of this stuff that we just wanted to have in the room. To me, I don't know if it's something I would do all the time, but it was definitely worth it for this trip. So I guess this is a good time to start bringing in the travel tips. And tip number 1 is to choose a resort-focused trip if you have young kids or babies, because it's going to be so much easier. On this trip, we did not leave the resort once. We made sure that this was what we were doing. This is where we are staying. And it just really, it takes all that pressure off of you trying to come up with an itinerary. We just reserved dinners every single night, which also were on the resort. So it just made everything easy. Everything is there when you need it. The thing I loved the most about this resort specifically for our kids was that they had a big family pool. And instead of it being like this family pool kind of far away from everybody or like separated from the rest of the resort, it was actually right in the middle of the resort. There was like the main restaurant right there. They had a bar right there, like even like kind of a swim up bar and stuff. So you actually felt like you were still part of all the action. Like there's so much happening at the resort, but you know, you're like still in like a place where people are socializing and everyone's actually trying to get to that area. You know, other things about choosing a resort focused trip is that there are, you know, like just everything that kids could want. Like endless amounts of French fries, endless amounts of smoothies and, you know, like juices and stuff. And we kind of have like a no rules, you know, like no rules rule when we go on vacation, where the kids can have a little bit more of the things that we don't necessarily allow like on a regular basis. The other reason to choose a resort like that is because there is, you know, like a kids club. And obviously kids clubs are mostly for kids that are like 4 and older, but I highly recommend if you do have kids that are within the age range of the kids club, I recommend taking them. We took Nikosh the last couple of times actually that we went to resorts. The first time he wasn't old enough for us to just leave him, but he still got to play around with all the new toys and stuff. The last 2 times we actually were able to leave him at the kids club. This time he was like, you can kind of go. His grandma took him and she came back to our room and she was like, he told me to leave. So, you know, so I think he had a really good time. And when we went to go pick him up, they gave him a little gift bag. He had like this little backpack and stuff. And he was like, look at all the cool stuff I got. And it was really just like tchotchkes and stuff, but it totally made his day. Like he loved going to the kids club. He went twice. That was all I think he really needed, but it just felt like it broke up his time and he had a really good time. And then we didn't have to watch him. So, you know, like Isla was napping. I got to take a nap myself, which never really happens. Like it started to feel more like a vacation. And these are the things that happen, you know, like you get to go down to the beach if you want to, or you can stay at the pool. The plunge pool that we had in our room, like the private plunge pool, I mean, that is so money. We've done that a few times now since having Nikosh, and you know, like they can swim and swim and swim and swim, and you know, they get really exhausted. It's the best thing ever. Kids get so exhausted when they're swimming so much. So if you really want to relax on vacation with your young kids, a baby or a toddler, or, you know, like a, you know, 4 or 5, 6-year-old. Maybe at 6, they're getting to that age where they can, you know, be a little bit more self-sufficient, but this is the best way to do it. And I'm not even saying it's like the most, you know, relaxing trip. I'm just saying it's going to be the better option. Now let's get into some of the actual travel tips, the tips for, you know, like being on the airplane with your kids and stuff. But before I even get into the tips, just a couple of notes. We definitely had to still wear our masks on the airplane. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, but if there's anyone wondering if your child is over the age of 2 and older, they were still pretty strict about it. Another note that I think is really important for parents especially is that if you do go out of the country and then want to come back in, you have to take a COVID test and obviously produce a negative COVID test before you can actually get in. And again, this goes for anyone over the age of 2. So we had to take our COVID test, but also Nikosh had to take his COVID test. And that was your typical, like, you know, the little like thing in your nose kind of COVID test, like a legit one. So that's also something to know. It didn't actually turn out to be a bad experience. He seemed to be like, I actually like was teasing some of the older men that were getting their COVID test right before him, that, you know, they were complaining about it. And I was like, look, Nikosh, see, you're so much braver than these guys, you know, like that kind of thing. So, you know, it wasn't a bad experience. And the resort actually offered COVID tests because I think it's such a regular thing. As far as tips for the actual airplane, now that we have 2 kids who are very aware. You know, it's not like we've got this little newborn baby and then a toddler or something. It's like 2 kids who kind of know what they want, and they want the same thing that the other wants as well or has. So for our flights, we have now learned that we should really just split, like sit in different aisles. That way both kids can get a window seat, because for takeoff and landing especially, they both want to hog the window, and it is the most annoying thing ever. So the flight out to Cabo, Arun got to sit in the aisle in front of us, and then Isla sat in his lap. So then she had her own window seat, and then Nikosh sat next to me because he obviously gets his own seat at this point, and he was able to have his own window seat as well, and that worked out beautifully. No one got into a fight. It was awesome. On the way back, we had no choice. We had to choose seats where we were just like across from each other, and Arun chose to be on the aisle. He prefers to be in the aisle anyway. So he sat in the aisle, and then it turned into this major fight between Isla and Nikosh over who's getting the window. It was like, ooh, such a mess. One of the worst things, you know, when you're flying as a parent, especially with young kids or with babies, is that you're trying not to make a commotion. Like, I know that we're always like prepared. I know I am, and I know all like my mom friends are. We're prepared to fight anybody that's like that wants to say like anything about our kids, right? Like if they complain about them crying or something, we're stand up and be like, I will fight you. But at the same time, like deep down, you don't actually want that to happen. You want everybody to be like happy, and you want everyone to be like, wow, your kids were so well behaved on this flight. So it's like, you know, if you can just think of all the things about your children and what you know about them and the things that they're gonna fight about, like I know for sure they're going to fight about the windows. So if you can try to figure that out, it's like a game changer. Another tip, if you can afford it, even if your baby is under the age of 2, I highly recommend getting your baby their own seat if it is a flight longer than like 2 hours, because this trip actually solidified that for me. We actually got back from Cabo, and one of the first things we decided was that on our next trip, which is coming in like early fall, we're going to Hawaii, which is like a 5 to 6 hour flight. We decided to get Isla her own seat for that flight, and the reason for it is because we can then take the car seat, install the car seat, and then she has her own place to sit. So we're not constantly trying to wrestle with her, you know, have her sit on our lap, let her eat in our laps and all that while we're trying to eat something, or, you know, just like trying to help Nikosh while, you know, trying to hold on to Isla and stuff. It's really stressful. So if you can afford it, if you can swing it, and it's a flight that's longer than like a couple of hours, try to get your child their own seat. Another tip for travel with young kids and babies is to have all the right must-haves. And I feel like this can get really personal, so I'm gonna just go ahead and share my must-haves from this trip. But really, it should spark in you like some of the things that you might need. Some of these things I feel like are just universal must-haves, but you know, you really have to know your children. We all know our kids the best, and we know the things that they're gonna end up needing. So hopefully these must-haves that I share will spark that for you. All right, so one of my first must-haves, I have talked about this forever. It still is one of the #1 products, and that is my Doona. So you're probably saying to yourself, well, isn't Doona an infant car seat? It is. It's an infant travel car seat that doubles as a stroller. Both of my kids actually have been able to use the Doona till about like 2 years old. It means that they're also small for the average child. So they both fit within the safe measurements of the Doona. You have to check that yourself and just make sure that your babies can use them. But if you have a newborn all the way up till the point where your child does not fit into the Doona anymore, I highly recommend traveling with it because it cuts out so many different pieces that are annoying and bulky and just terrible to travel with. And that is a big bulky stroller and a big bulky car seat. You know, you just don't want to have to travel with all of those things. This doubles as both of them, and it's pretty sleek. It's definitely heavy because it is a stroller built into a car seat, but it still was completely worth it, especially on this trip. You know, we landed, put Isla into the Doona and strapped her in, and then we had to go through customs because we were in another country. So while we're in this customs line, and Cabo is like notorious for this really long customs line, you know, in this long line, Isla had yet to take her nap, so she finally fell asleep the minute we put her into the Doona, and she slept through the entire line. And then when we exited the airport, we were able to put the Doona into the car and strap it in while she was still sleeping, and that was so money. Second, kind of along those lines, this is a brand new product to us. I was like shopping for some travel products, you know, things to take with us on vacation, and this just happened to pop up in my feed, and I was like, oh, I gotta try this. It is a suitcase from the company Micro. They are the company that makes the little like scooters for all the kids and stuff that every kid seems to have these days. It's a carry-on suitcase that also has kind of like it's not a scooter function, but it has wheels and pops out, and your child gets to sit on it and you just pull them on the suitcase. It is one of the best things that we have purchased for travel. Like Arun, when he first saw it, was like, this is so unnecessary. And when I was like asking him like, were there any tips, you know, that I should include in this video? This was his #1 tip, to get this Micro suitcase. Like, it was one of his favorite things that I've ever purchased for travel because it took a lot of stress off of us with having 2 kids at the airport. So this was awesome because essentially the way it works is, you know, like just like your regular suitcase, it has this little bar that goes up. This right here is like a little handlebar for your child. And then I'm gonna just put it down really quick so you can see this. And then back here, it just has this little button where you can just pop the wheels out, and then it just closes right back into it. So I use this as our carry-on suitcase, and I actually always have a small carry-on anytime that we're traveling with the kids, especially because I put in like a day's worth of clothing and stuff in here with, you know, just like the essentials. That way, if we did land, we could go at least a day without our suitcase, and the kids would at least have like a good time. It is so smooth. It wheels around really, really smoothly. Nikosh like felt really secure. Like he never once jumped off of this thing. Like he was on it the entire time. So, you know, like if you're rushing at the airport, the last thing you want to do is try to like pick up your heavy 4-year-old and try to like run because he's getting all upset or something. And these are real experiences that we've had with Nikosh. So instead, it was like we could rush through the airport and we knew that we had him on here securely and safely, and he didn't complain. I feel like he had a lot of fun. My one complaint, opening this up, just so that you guys can see, is that they haven't really worked out the space inside of this. If you look inside, this right here is that little like the scooter part of it, like the wheels in the back, they go into the actual suitcase. So it looks like it's a pretty spacious suitcase from the outside, but then when you open it up, you realize you actually lose a decent amount of space in here. So it doesn't fit as much as you would think. Is it enough space? It was plenty of space. You just have to get a little crafty with it, but it does trick you into thinking you're gonna have a lot more space in this. Like this is not gonna fit like a weekend, you know, day trip type of thing. This is not gonna be the bag. As far as activities on the airplane for the kids, so obviously iPad for your child. If your child like understands the iPad and uses the iPad now, having the iPad loaded up with their favorite shows, their favorite movies, anything like that, especially in case you don't have access to Wi-Fi on the airplane, you need to have everything downloaded, or even like games, whatever it is that you know your child likes on their iPad, have all of that ready to go with some headphones. But even for Isla, we had on Arun's iPad, we had a bunch of like toddler games loaded up on there, and we definitely had to pull it out at a couple of times throughout the flights because she just was like about to lose it. She was tired. We did everything that we could. Like we like used all the snacks, used all the toys, all of that stuff. And we eventually had to pull out the iPad to just keep her entertained at least for like 10-15 minutes. At her age, her attention span is much, much shorter. So having as many options as you can is really helpful. As far as other stuff to bring onto the airplane though, besides an iPad, especially if you don't want your kid to spend too much time on an iPad, are reusable stickers. Melissa and Doug has these really great reusable stickers with like little backgrounds and stuff. The kids love them. It keeps them pretty entertained for a decent amount of time. So I bought a bunch of those and brought those on the trip. I think like part of like these activities and keeping them busy is the opening part. Kids love to open new stuff, at least mine do. So I bring all of it like in its packaging still so that they can actually open it themselves. There were also these reusable stickers that I bought that are meant to be put onto windows. Again, knowing that Isla was gonna have her own window seat, I got these stickers because they're almost like jelly-like. They're really, really cute. And she could like play with them a little bit. So she got the sensory experience with them. And then she could also like stick them onto the window, and we knew it wasn't gonna be permanent. She just pulled them right back off and then put them on, took them off, put them on. It actually like kept her attention for a little bit longer than all the other stuff that she had, and then she would come back to these too. On this trip, I also brought things like coloring books for Isla. For Nikosh, I brought this amazing dinosaur activity book that was so good. He actually chose the book more than he did his iPad, which almost never happens. When he gets like access to his iPad, and we're not telling him there's a limit to it, he would usually choose that. But he loved this dinosaur book. He also just loves dinosaurs in general. I think it was from like National Geographic, and I got it off of Amazon, and it came with stickers inside that you could tear off, and they would be numbered according to the page that they went to. And then it had all these like activities throughout the book too, where you could color, there were like mazes, that kind of stuff. So he loved that book. I highly recommend it. I will absolutely put it in the description box because it was just such a great book. As far as crayons for the airplane and just in general, I love these. These are silky washable crayons. I think the company is Melo. The reason why I love these, and during the trip I didn't actually take these containers, but a couple reasons to choose these crayons. One, when you're traveling, they're great because they look more like a marker, so you actually have caps for them, so they're not just like open and can spill everywhere and get all over the place and melt and break and all of that stuff that happens with crayons. But the other thing, the reason why they're called silky crayon, is that they actually are very pigmented. I feel like I'm talking about makeup now. So for instance, if your child is coloring, they get I mean, look at that. That looks like it's lipstick or something. I feel like I'm talking about makeup right now. This is like a creamy red lipstick and it's highly pigmented. And your kids really get like a lot of payoff when they're using these crayons. I feel like they get frustrated. I've seen Nikosh kind of get frustrated with his regular crayons before because he's having to work so hard. I mean, I've been frustrated when I've colored with him using regular crayons. So these are awesome because you barely, I mean, like even if I just like do this the way like Isla would hold it, you know, I feel like it just gives a really good payoff that kids love, and then they're washable, so you're not that stressed out, and then they actually twist. I mean, these are great crayons, so highly recommend these. Melo, I'll put the link in the description box as well. Another must-have for the airplane, which I think all parents know, but just to reiterate this one, you cannot have enough snacks. You really cannot have enough snacks on the airplane, and this is the time, if there were any time to bring candy, this is the time to have candy, because candy is your last resort. Like, be fully prepared to have kids that are filled with sugar and terrible by the end of the flight, but it is kind of like if you cannot get your kids to stop screaming or having a tantrum or freaking out, especially if they're exhausted and need to take a nap, candy is always the last resort. You have to pull that stuff out, in my humble opinion. Anyway, so obviously lots of snacks. We bring a lot of the things like applesauce, for instance, and just like anything that you know your child just loves, bring it. String cheese, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We used to always pack a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for Nikosh back when he was a toddler because he loved to eat that on the airplane. Blueberries, I would pack like blueberries because they're a really easy fruit to pack like that. Those were all the things that were my go-tos. So what I found, especially now that Nikosh is in preschool, is that kids love these like bento style boxes, or really it's like Lunchables. Like if you can just buy Lunchables, that probably works too, because kids just love this, like being able to like pick and choose what it is that they want to eat and stuff, especially if it feels like fun and new. So like Lunchables, if you're in a hurry, if you can pack one of those like bento box lunch boxes for your kids for the flight. Again, there's something about the like opening up little gifts and packages and stuff. So like if you can put like a little, you know, like a little snack that's in a package that's also in the bento box. So it gives them like an activity for it. And that's just definitely something that I've been doing with Nikosh and Isla in general lately when we're out and about. They love the bento style boxes. Nikosh gets one for his lunch every single day. Another must have for just any trip, really, whether it's a pool trip, resort trip, or you know, a trip anywhere, is to have a new toy. It doesn't even have to be a large toy, but a new toy to open on the trip, especially if you're gonna leave your kids with a babysitter. And we knew we were gonna leave the kids at least one of the nights with my in-laws. So I had, you know, like an activity for them, basically like it was actually just stickers again, but it was like a different type of reusable sticker. It's really helpful on vacation for them to have some kind of a new toy to open up. It doesn't even have to be expensive. Like one trip I had these like cheap little cars that I got for Nikosh, and then Magnetiles for one trip that he had never had before, so he got to open up Magnetiles on a trip. On another trip I took like dinosaur eggs that had slime. My clothing came back with slime all over them, unfortunately, but it was still a hit with him, so it's totally worth it. So it doesn't have to be anything expensive. You can go to the dollar store. There are all these little things that you can just buy to have on the trip with you. A few other tips for travel, just in general. You know, for Nikosh, we asked for a rollaway bed. We've actually been doing that for a little while, ever since he started sleeping in his own bed. We've just always made sure to ask for a rollaway, like a cot bed, and he loves it. He thinks that these beds were made for him. Like he thinks that they're bringing him his own personalized bed. So it's awesome, and it makes it so much easier to sleep like that instead of having to, you know, like have your child sleep in the same bed as you. For Isla, we asked for a crib. I feel like this has never been an issue in any of the places that we've stayed, but we have always called ahead of time and reminded them, even if we made a note in our reservation for the hotel, even with Nikosh, we have always called ahead of time and reminded them that we want a crib, because sometimes if it's like a hotel that it has a lot of families, they might be like a first come first serve situation. So you want to make sure you are reserving your crib. A couple of other things, obviously you're going to bring the stuff that your babies or that your kids need. For us, those things were like, you know, like their blankets that they sleep with. We cannot travel without those. We went on a vacation with Nikosh once where I forgot his sleep blanket, and the first 2 nights were hell trying to get him to go to sleep without it. Like, you don't realize how attached they are until you are like met with this moment where they cannot go to sleep without it. We also brought sippy cups, their own sippy cups for this. You know, like both of the kids can pretty much like drink out of regular cups now, but it saves you so much time and, you know, avoiding all the little like mistakes that they can make, the accidents they can make with regular cups. It's super helpful to have their own sippy cups, even if it's just one cup for each of them. And then on this trip, I actually do wish I would have brought some bibs for Isla. Like, we're not always using bibs on her, but for this trip, I really wish we had them, even when we went to go eat at restaurants especially. There was this one night where she got soaked with one of her drinks. I wasn't like going to the restaurants with a diaper bag because we were in walking distance of our hotel room. But there was this one night where she just soaked herself. It was like halfway through the dinner. I luckily had like a little hoodie for her, so I just like took all her clothes off and she sat in a diaper and I put a hoodie on her, her little like hoodie that I brought with us downstairs. And that's what she like wore for the rest of dinner because she was covered. Her clothing was just like completely soaked with other stuff. So, you know, those are little things that I thought about. I wish we would have had one set of utensils for Isla, toddler utensils, just because she's in this phase right now where she still sometimes eats with her hands. And I think when she's really hungry, she like reverts to using her hands because it's faster, but she really wants to master eating with utensils. So when we were at the restaurants or we were eating even just in our hotel room, there was never utensils for her. So she would want to use the adult utensils that are like big and heavy and stuff, and she just couldn't do it, and it was really frustrating for her. So in hindsight, I wish I would have brought at least one set of utensils for her. And since this was a beach vacation slash like pool resort vacation, obviously I brought lots of sunscreen for the kids and for myself. I brought hats for them, lots of UPF. I mean, all of their swimsuits are UPF 50 swimsuits, so they essentially are getting that sun protection, but I also have them covered in sunscreen, also have them, you know, like with the hats on and all that kind of stuff. As far as the UPF 50 swimsuits, you can also get them in adult sizes, and there was one day where I matched the kids. It was slightly embarrassing, but totally worth it because this is a fleeting time, and I know I won't be able to get the kids to match me just like that ever again when they're older, so I'll always have the memories. Something that I think parents don't always think about, I've talked about these before, but you know, water shoes, these are from Nike. Water shoes are such a good idea for your kids when you're at the pool or the beach because one, you don't want their toes and stuff to get really raw. You know, they're like running around and stuff, so it gives them grip, protects their toes, and then when they get out of the pool or out of the beach water and the sand is hot or the concrete is hot, they don't burn their little toes when they have these on, so they just wear them in the pool and in the water. It just saves you from having all the little ouchies that can really ruin the day for your kid and for you when they're like freaking out over like kind of nothing, but it's a big deal to them. These little water shoes are really helpful, and the best ones honestly are these ones from Nike. We actually just purchased a brand new pair after this trip for Nikosh because he was outgrowing his other ones, and these actually sell out often, so we bought him this size, like his current size, and we just ordered a pair of one size up for him too because they really are so key when it comes to beach and pool activities for your little ones because they're just all over the place. And even when you tell them no running around the pool, you still catch them running around the pool, so at least they have grip, but you should still tell them to not run. So those are all of my tips. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments below. If you are going on any trips this year, in the next couple of months, let us know in the comments. Let's celebrate together and be excited together. This was honestly such a great trip. I mean, we got to celebrate. We went to a couple of really nice dinners together as a family. It was really nice to be able to get out and take a trip. So I highly recommend it if you can do it. I feel so happy for everybody that we get to do all these things. So it's like a whole new world. Travel. Follow me on Instagram if you don't already. I'm at Susan Yara, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.